Today my hair looks like a banshee's, but for once, that's appropriate. Today I'm going to recommend you some spooky, creepy books for Halloween, because Halloween is coming upon us, and at this time of year people generally like to read scary books. Some people like to read seasonally. I'm not particularly one of those people, but I thought I would recommend you some creepy books. Not quite all the way to scary, but pretty creepy, so as you can enjoy them this Halloween if that's your thing. The first is Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. This is a collection of short stories that go along with a series that Leigh Bardugo has written, but you don't have to read that series to enjoy this book, so that's why I'm recommending it in this video. These are fairy tale-esque fantasy stories that are really creepy and done really well, written so beautifully. Honestly, even if creepy stories aren't your thing, I think you'll really enjoy this book. This is probably the least creepy of the books I'm going to recommend, but it's really, really enjoyable to read. The next book I'm going to recommend to you is a classic, and that is The Italian by Anne Radcliffe. Anything really by Anne Radcliffe is kind of amazing. She is this gothic writer from I think the 1700s. She does these really extreme, over-the-top, almost comical gothic novels that were like taken seriously at the time, but when you read them today they're like so extreme. They're entertaining. This is the only Anne Radcliffe book I own a physical copy of, which is why I'm recommending this one, but there are so many that are just excellent. Her books usually involve some kind of young girl who suddenly finds herself in a huge mystery involving murder and revenge and years-long plots, and they're just so extreme and really entertaining. But they still have that element of creepiness and sincerity to them. A Sicilian Romance is also a great Anne Radcliffe book. Definitely one I recommend if you like classics at all. The next book I recommend is The Madman's Daughter by Megan Shepherd. This is the first in a young adult trilogy about a girl whose father was kind of a mad scientist who created monsters out of animals by like taking them apart and putting them back together. He went missing and she's kind of been outcast from her society, but then one day she decides to go look for her father, and what she finds is pretty creepy. What I enjoy most about this is the slow build up and how it gets creepier and creepier and darker until at the end you're so invested in the story that it becomes just this like all-consuming kind of thing. It's one of those series where every book gets better and better, and there's that same slow, creepy build up to a big finale in each one. Next, I recommend The Diviners by Libba Bray. This is another first book in a young adult historically set series, but it is done so well. It is set in the 1920s about this girl called Evie, and there is this society of people who deal with supernatural things, and they're kind of under the radar, and it has a paranormal kind of murder plot. It's pretty dark considering it is a young adult book, and there is a whole mystery, creepy horror element to it. It's one of those books that's crafted so well. I haven't read any more of the series yet, but I'm looking forward to when the last book is finally released. The next creepy book I recommend is another Libba Bray book, and that is A Great and Terrible Beauty, and this is a young adult historical fiction book. It's kind of like a darker Narnia. These girls go to a Victorian, I think it's Victorian. This young girl, Gemma Doyle, goes to a Victorian boarding school, and in that school she doesn't really get on with too many people, but she does find the passageway to a magical land where at first everything seems really fantastic and much better than her life in real life England in this boarding school, but soon it does become apparent that things are not all as nice as they seem. And when not only is she able to go in, but things start to come out of that world, things get really dark pretty quickly, and this whole series is pretty blinking fantastic. The book is like a more mature, darker Narnia, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, definitely one I would recommend. And now for a book that's genuinely up there with the creepy books, and that is The Monstrumologist by Rick Yancey. Another first book in a series. I know it's kind of hard to recommend an entire series, but this one has quite a few jumpy, scary, but it's scary in the same way that Jurassic Park is scary. It's about this young boy called Henry, I think Will Henry. It's about a young boy called Will Henry who goes to work for the Monstrumologist as his apprentice. Now, the Monstrumologist is a scientist of sorts who goes on the lookout for these new monsters so as he can capture, kill, or study them depending on how much havoc they're wreaking. The thing about this book is that there are quite a few jumpy, scary moments, like those jump scares that are just like, just can't quite deal with it. It's perfect actually for this time of year. It is a fantastic spooky story. It's quite gory in places. Now there's a lot of gore, so if that's not your thing, what are you looking at, a Halloween recommendations video? I mean, really. This book is quite graphically gory, quite jumpy, scary, and it's actually really enjoyable for all those reasons. Next we have another classic, and that is Wuthering Heights. This book you've probably heard of, maybe you had to read it for school, but it has a lot of creepy elements to it. It is kind of this long, twisted love story that spans over generations. It is about this girl called Kathy, and her family kind of takes in this orphan called Heathcliff, and they kind of grow up together and start to fall for each other, but different things happen that make it not possible for them to be together, and then stuff happens, and not any of it is good. No one is happy in this book. It's quite a dark romance, and if you haven't read it before, I highly recommend trying it. If you've ever walked into an IKEA store and felt that things weren't quite right, then this next book is for you. Horror Store by Grady Hendrix. This is quite a cool formatted book. It stood out like an IKEA catalogue, except it's about this store called Orsk. These employees notice every morning that something is not quite right. Everything has been thrown around, there's these stains that stink, everything is filthy and dirty, and they're like, who is vandalizing the store at night? So they, like all clever people in a horror book, they decide to stay overnight to try and catch the vandals, which is not safe. Don't do that to your employees. Anyway, you find out what has been happening in the store at night, and none of it's pleasant. There's all these illustrations for what the shop Orsk sells, like, you know, couches and other things like that, and as the book goes on they get darker and creepier stuff. It's just so cleverly done, and it's quite creepy. I mean, if you look at the cover, you got this nice furniture store, and there's this guy, and then on the back you kind of see it at night. It's a pretty creepy book that I definitely recommend. Next, I recommend Through the Woods by Emily Carroll. This is a graphic novel, so it's quite quick and easy to kind of breeze through. This is a collection of short fairy tale-esque type stories. They start off pretty light but gradually get darker and darker and darker. It's really easy to breeze through. You could literally read it in an hour. So if you're looking for something for like Halloween night, this would be perfect. And for the final, scariest story of all. No, I'm joking. This isn't scary, but except for maybe in the success that it had for what it was. But I did enjoy it when I read it first, so no shame. And that's all I have for you guys today. Leave any suggestions for spooky books down in the comments so as other people can get more recommendations. And thank you guys so much for watching. Bye. This lighting is not ideal, but I put a lot of work into getting all the glitter on my lips, and you can't even see it in this light. It's holographic. You're just gonna have to take my word for it in real life. Pretty cool.